Okay, 2 seconds on this. The reason I'm giving this talk is I took my first AWS exam in December of 2015. So I've been doing AWS exams for about 7.5 years now. And I'm just trying to share some of the things I've learned and how things have changed over the years. Did you have a question?
You use swap for presentation. You're on speaker view instead of presentation view.
I'm on speaker mute. What should I do? I'm
Upper right hand corner is swap.
Oh yeah, I see it. There, are we good now? Oh, thank you, thank you. Little technical difficulties. So I've been doing these a while, and I'm just trying to share some of the things I learned relatively quickly, so that we don't miss lunch. Yeah, that's a lot of certifications. I'm going to cover like 7 quick questions here, and sort of that's why I call it an FAQ. So let's just, and we could have a big discussion about why to take certifications. And when you get the slides, there's a lot of notes in here that has a lot more detail behind this on the slides. But basically, the best argument that I've come up with is that certificate, if you're a developer, chances are you went to college. Not necessarily, that has changed. But what you learn in college and what you learn on the job, actually doing the job, are different things. They're complementary. And so the certifications is like, I think another session I attended, they said there's over 300 AWS services right now. So think of the certifications as a way of knowing the context and the landscape, so you know where to look, what to research, and what to do. And so I don't think one is a substitute for the other. And that's kind of what I'm covering here. Obviously, there's some other advantages as far as LinkedIn and people reaching out to you, or if you're in a consulting firm, it's important for vendor relations and things like that. So what are the best study resources? I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes. First of all, I'm going to tell you don't follow that. I'm going to tell you right now that the best stuff out there is probably Tutorials Dojo, and there's a link in the slides on that. And what that means is it's the best example I can give you. When I was studying for the AWS Data Analytics Specialty Exam, it was, 65 questions in the little practice test. And the actual PDF that came out after it scored was 250 pages long. And on those pages was the questions, the links to all the AWS resources and things like that. It was almost like the world's best study guide. So I would recommend totally that site. And the other thing I would recommend totally, if you have access to it, is O'Reilly has these live events, and as part of those live events, they have crash courses for various AWS certifications. They're really excellent, and they also combat some other things in the sense that they're up to date, and they'll have lots of other resources, get lives, slides, walk you through some of the things to expect, and give you sort of the latest things. So those are the best stuff out there. Back when I was first doing exams, Cloud Guru was the gold standard, but right now they're more enterprise focused, where they tend to be little hot topics, not a whole certification thing, and they don't tend to go into enough depth. We could have another discussion about where you would go if you really want that kind of depth. Is there any questions yet from the audience about any of this? Raise your hand or stop me or any time. But like I said, I'm trying to make up for a late start here. When you should take them. When someone publishes these resources, a lot of times you want to get as close as you can to when they're timely, that the things are updates. Exams have a half-life, so whatever study materials you're doing, they're gonna, every 6 months, the test is gonna change, give or take. And so you kind of want to keep an idea about that. Where do you take them? The answer is, it depends, but the people I've talked to, in my personal experience, I'd rather do it in a testing center. There's some points up on the slide here that have to do with what makes a good testing center, or what you might have to worry about. So I would just say that. And you look at the quality and the location and things like that. And talk a little bit about pacing, but you probably have some experience with that. I can tell you that, you know, what we're trying to tell is pacing on the tests, stamina for some of the longer tests, the 3-hour tests that are the specialties and professional ones. No questions, okay. Practice tests are really important, but they're not important for the reason you might think. What it is that they're important from a sense of a study guide. So one of the suggestions that you have for a study material is AWS FAQs for the various services. One of the things about an FAQ is it's going to ask frequently asked questions, also turn into topic for frequently asked exam questions. And the same thing happens with these practice tests. What you're having, whoever's doing them, is you're having someone, okay, these are the topics, these are the areas, what kind of questions might I have? It's just really a study guide. There's a bunch of, in my examples, there's a bunch of different places you can go. I mentioned tutorial dojos, Whiz Labs, it varies. The practice exams that you see in like A Cloud Guru or something like that, they don't tend to be detailed enough to really help you know what you want to focus on. I have stories, if anybody wants to stay for them, about what it's like taking beta exams. I generally don't recommend it. I took my first beta exam for the advanced networking beta exam back in many years ago. And that was when AWS was first launching specialty exams. And it was a bit of a train wreck because it took them 5 months to get back to me on whether I passed. And there was some lots of other stuff going on there as well. My other funny one was the machine learning exam. I was at my first reInvent. It was in beta. And for money reasons, I was leaving on Thursday. So I couldn't attend really many of the afternoon sessions. So I said I might as well take exams. So I just took them because it was like free retry or something like that. So it didn't count. It was almost like a practice exam. So, you know, and I passed it with a 750, which I think was the minimum score. Like I just passed it. And it was like, oh, that's great. 3 years later, when I renewed it, it was a lot harder. That's the other thing I can say about these exams is it's amazing how they change because the technology changes, of course, and what you have to learn and things also change. Okay, I got to the questions. I was kind of rushing through there. I have a lot. If you want, I can go back. If there's any particular area of those topics that you want me to go into more details, I can. Yes, please.
So, what about Udemy? There are lots of courses on Udemy.
There's nothing wrong per se with Unity, but and they used to resell all the Cloud Guru ones. It's kind of funny. Tutorials Dojos is cheaper and better in the sense that, again, what are you trying to get? Are you trying to get a bunch of videos to watch? Or are you trying to get some sort of organized set of information And you're gonna find tutorial dojos is, I don't know, it's Udemy priced, and they work very hard at keeping it up to date. That's my take. That said, I took a Google database engineer exam, and the only place I could find any study materials or practice exams or anything was on Udemy. So it's not that I don't have anything against Udemy or anything like that. It's more like there's different things. One of the things I could talk about here too, just off the top of my head, is that when you get these certifications, there's a question of whether you're going to maintain them and what that's going to take. One of the nice things about AWS is that if you renew your professional, it renews the corresponding associates and practitioner exams. So you end up only have to taking the recertifying the pros and the specialties. By the way, for what it's worth, the specialties are probably, I know they're probably harder than the professional ones because they go into a lot more detail and they're just as long. And you don't have, the other thing I can say is as you take more of these exams, there's overlapping exams. One of the things I noticed when I took the machine learning exam as a beta was how much the big data and the data analytics stuff was there. And so, I got a bunch of questions right that had to do with data prep and feature engineering and things that aren't necessarily machine learning. Any more questions? Yes. It depends why you're taking the practice test. If you're taking the practice test to practice, being on a clock and pacing yourself and getting, then you do them, you might do them more than once. If what you're using it is more study materials, what I do is I only do it once. I save it as a PDF, and then I use it as study materials where I just review it. And most of these, like Whiz Labs, or tutorial dojos will probably have 2 practice exams in there, and I'll do both. And Whiz Labs might, depending on if it's like a pro exam or something like that, they might have 5. They might have ones for specific sections and things like that. It all depends. I'll go through all of them, but I won't do it multiple times because I'll save the results. And really what I want to do is I want to review why I got it wrong, what I didn't understand, and the links to the various AWS documentation and other stuff. One side note, sometimes those links aren't to AWS documentation, especially in the specialty exams like machine learning and the big data. They're going to public sites because the community of data analytics and machine learning is far larger than AWS itself. And so they'll link to the appropriate sites. More questions back there? Yes. The problem that ACAL Guru has, or any of those places, is it takes a lot of time and energy to create those videos. And so there's usually, like, if they announce a new exam on that you could take, it might be 6 months before there were ACAL Guru training or something like that. If you do these live events, crash courses, he has a set of slides. He's probably taken the exam, the new exam as a beta, or he took it like within the last quarter or 3 months or something. And so he knows exactly what's going on. And so it's going to be up to date in a way that, and it's not practicing tests. He'll have little what if practices. He'll have little, how would you answer this question? And he'll poll the audience and stuff. He'll do a little bit of that, but he's mostly covering the areas and saying, this is what you need to know. This is the level of depth you need to know it. Here's my GitHub, and I have all the slides and documentation and links and things like, they'll create sheets of links of things you could go to and study. It's going to be it is the most up-to-date thing you can have. That's why. that make sense? We had more questions back there. Go ahead. I couldn't quite hear that. They're excellent. Adrian is excellent. There's no question about that. I totally agree with him. I used to take Adrian when I was when he was with AWS Guru. I used his materials when he was at Linux Academy. His stuff is excellent, and I have no issues with it. If you want, you know, if that's the path you want to go to. I mean, to be honest with you, I did AWS Guru for the study specialty, and it was literally the only exam I've ever failed. And then I went back. At that point, Adrian was at Linux Academy, and I went through his stuff, which was twice as long and covered enough things. That's the problem with like an AWS Guru, or honestly a Udemy or any of those places. They're not going to go to the depth. They're not going to go to the kinds of questions. None of these things is giving you is a brain dump. None of these things are giving you the questions. It's just someone making up sample questions that are specific to the areas. The other thing to realize, and I could go on quite a bit on this, the other thing to realize is when you answer a question, even if maybe English isn't the first primary language of the person who wrote the question, so you get it wrong because the grammar was messed up and it was messing up with your head and you couldn't quite understand what you're supposed to do. If you go to a question, someone told me this in a boot camp for a CISSP boot camp. In that case, it was imagine if you were a security manager and answer these questions like a security manager, not a security engineer. So when you go into these questions, everybody here is bothering to take these tests is going to actually do this as a job and answer the question like you would in real life. Don't try to overthink it. Don't try to think it's a trick question. Answer it unless it's something really dumb, like what's the default length for messages in SMS or something like that. Or, you know, and they used to be those, there's a lot less, it's mostly scenario stuff now. So they want you to know if you understand it, not if you can remember a bunch of stupid little numbers. So it's less about that. But since it's that understand it thing, answer it like you would in real life. In other words, they give you 3 choices of kind of technologies you could use. What would you actually do? Would you really put that thing in elastic beanstalk at this day and age? No. Don't answer the question like that. Answer it like you would for real. And that will probably give you more success than trying to outthink the person who's trying to write the question to try to test if you know something. Does that make sense? And that's helped me quite a bit too. And then there's the stupid stuff like, don't be tired. Like that exam I failed, I moved my daughter back from college and only had 4 hours of sleep before taking the train down to Chicago. And so my mental resources probably weren't at the top, in addition to the fact I didn't have Adrian, if that makes sense. More questions? Yes?
Yeah, how much the exams cost?
Well, the AWS exams are very generous that way in that it's 3 years. And like I said, the earlier ones you don't have to renew, the associate ones and the practitioner. So there's 4 you don't have to renew. So it's not too bad. If all you wanted to do is just get the pros, get up to the pros and say you're done, it's 2 exams every 3 years. So that's pretty painless. It's when you get into the specialty exams, of which I have almost all of them. Those can be painful because they'll come up and you'll be, honestly, when you look at that, I'm basically studying for a renewal all the time. That makes sense. More questions? Well, if there's no more questions, I strongly encourage you, I can't even begin to explain, except here, I want to show you some. I just want to show you the slide. If you look at these slides here, like what about beta exams? It's small, but in the notes for all these slides that you'll have available to you, there's a ton of information and experience that I'm trying to cut short because I was kind of running behind here. So I would encourage you, if you look at any, or my favorite here, you know, my last parting gift here, these are the quick takeaways. These are the answers to the 5 things. You know, certification provides conceptual framework and helps keeping up with technology. Crash courses were available. Tutorial JoJo's is what you want to use. And even that recommendation will change over time as things happen, and it also varies with cloud vendors. If you want to have a discussion about how to study for Microsoft, I'll have the concepts are the same, but I'll have different resources that you need to use. And you're so close, you can actually read that. I do apologize that. Avoid stale study material. When practical, in person is better for taking the exam. Pace yourself, don't get hung up. Choose an answer and keep going. Practice tests make good study guides. Taking beta exams is probably not worth the extra hassle. So that's the takeaways. Thanks, guys, for